Some stories begin with a scream or a shadow or even a single drop of blood. This one begins with a woman in pain and ends with a hospital in chaos. It's February 19th, 1994, a Saturday evening in Riverside, California. 31-year-old Gloria Ramirez, a mother of two, is being rushed by ambulance to the emergency room at Riverside General Hospital. She's conscious, but barely. She has late-stage cervical cancer and she's struggling to breathe. Her heart is racing, her blood pressure is falling. Paramedics radio ahead, they've got a code. As the ER team prepares, they're expecting a routine, if critical, case. Gloria is placed on a gurney, her vitals are crashing, nurses and doctors begin to administer treatment, oxygen, sedatives, and then they attempt to defibrillate. And then something strange happens. One nurse notes a garlicky, fruity odor coming from Gloria's mouth. Another says there's a shiny, oily film on her skin. It's strange, slippery, almost like petroleum jelly. An intern draws blood and gasps. The syringe smells like ammonia. Inside the tube are brown, floating crystals. Got that? That's not normal. That's not like anything they've encountered before. Within minutes, ER staff begin to collapse. Nurse Susan Kane is the first to faint. She's rushed out of the room and lost consciousness for a number of minutes. Then, respiratory therapist Maureen Welch slumps to the floor. Dr. Julie Gorzinski, the attending resident, begins trembling uncontrollably and has to be wheeled out on a gurney herself. The ER is evacuated. 23 staff members report symptoms, 5 are hospitalized. The entire hospital goes into hazmat lockdown. And Gloria Ramirez, she passes away at 8:50 p.m. I'm John Genoa, and you're watching America's Strangest History. Now, this fact pattern is admittedly unusual, but it isn't even the end of the story. It's the beginning of one of the strangest medical mysteries in American history. A woman dies and nearly takes the entire hospital with her. They called her the toxic woman. When the emergency room at Riverside General was evacuated that night, hospital protocol broke down. This wasn't a chemical spill. This wasn't a contagious virus. This was one woman's body and whatever had been inside it. As the ER emptied, Gloria Ramirez's body was left alone under biohazard watch. By midnight, the Riverside County hazmat team arrived, outfitted in full protective gear. They took air samples, wiped down surfaces, and examined her clothing and personal items. But they found nothing. No toxins in the air, no radioactive material, no evidence of any external contamination at all. Yet people were collapsing hard. 5 people were hospitalized, some with bizarre symptoms. Dr. Julie Gorzinski, the resident who'd drawn Ramirez's blood, experienced fainting, nausea, and muscle spasms. But even more disturbingly, she later developed avascular necrosis in her knees. Now that's when bone tissue dies due to lack of blood. It's an extremely rare condition, especially for a healthy young doctor. She even later required surgery. Susan Kane, the nurse who collapsed first, reported difficulty breathing and temporary memory loss. Other staff complained of burning sensations, paralysis, dizziness, and convulsions. The medical response wasn't panic, it was physical, it was real, so this wasn't mass hysteria, not yet at least. But here's where the story really turns. The coroner's office transported Gloria Ramirez's body to a secure location. An autopsy was delayed, not by incompetence, but by fear. Investigators worried that whatever made her toxic might still be active, so they stored her in a sealed aluminum casket inside a negative pressure chamber. She was given a full hazmat classified examination unlike any other civilian autopsy in California state history. And still, the mystery deepened. Tissue samples showed nothing lethal, no drugs, no toxins. Her organs were badly damaged, yes, but that could be explained by her advanced cancer. What couldn't be explained was how a room full of professionals almost died trying to save her. The press had a field day. They dubbed her the toxic woman. Tabloids speculated everything from alien viruses to government experiment. But behind the scenes, the Department of Health launched a formal investigation with one question in mind: what happened to Gloria Ramirez? And that brings us to the first major theory. A theory so bizarre it sounds like science fiction, but might actually just be science. When you strip away the tabloids, the mass hysteria headlines, and the whispers about aliens, you're left with a body, a chain of chemical symptoms, and a room of trained professionals who were in fact physically overwhelmed. So, what did the official investigators think, right? It's a good place to begin. Well, their leading theory focused on a solvent that you could buy in any hardware store. Something so unassuming, so mundane, it sounds kind of ridiculous. Dimethyl sulfoxide, or simply DMSO for short. DMSO is a solvent, colorless liquid used industrial to degrease machinery. But in the 1960s and 70s, it developed kind of a cult following as a home remedy. Alternative medicine circles claim that it would relieve joint pain, reduce inflammation, and possibly even treat cancer. The catch? Well, it wasn't approved by the FDA for most medical uses. Still, people used it, often by rubbing it into their skin. It's absorbed through the skin almost instantly, and it could even carry other chemicals with it directly into the bloodstream. DMSO also has a signature garlic or oyster-like odor, and it leaves slick sheen on the skin, just like what the ER staff described. Now here's where it gets strange, maybe even dangerously plausible. According to a 1997 report in Forensic Science International, the California Department of Health proposed that Gloria Ramirez may have been self-treating her cancer with DMSO. Perhaps she was rubbing it on her skin to relieve pain or something. When she was admitted to the ER, doctors administered oxygen and began defibrillation. Now, this may have inadvertently triggered a chemical conversion. Under these conditions, DMSO can theoretically convert to dimethyl sulfone. That's DMSO2. Now, it's relatively harmless, but under the added presence of oxygen and possibly electrical shock, DMSO2 could convert to dimethyl sulfate, or DMSO4. Now, that's a highly toxic gas used in chemical warfare. Dimethyl sulfate can cause seizures, convulsions, paralysis, respiratory failure. These are all symptoms experienced by the ER staff. Let that sink in. This theory suggests that a home remedy combined with oxygen, electricity, and a desperate medical response created a brief, accidental nerve agent factory inside of Gloria Ramirez's body. It's speculative. It's not proven, but it's the only theory that explains every single physical symptom experienced that night. Still, not everyone accepts it, because if you dig deeper, there's more that doesn't quite add up. And as always, where science stumbles, conspiracy moves in. The DMSO theory was technical, it was compelling, it checked all the right boxes, but almost as quickly as it was introduced, it became controversial. Several forensic scientists, including those not affiliated with the California Department of Health, questioned the logic. They pointed out there's no documented precedent for DMSO converting into dimethyl sulfate inside the human body. It's never happened. The hospital room was ventilated. There was no evidence of airborne toxins. And DSMO, while odd-smelling and medically frowned upon, is generally considered low in toxicity. So if not DMSO, then what was it? Let's look at the theories. As the public wrestled with the unanswered questions, conspiracy theories began to take root. Some believed Gloria Ramirez had undergone experimental cancer treatments involving radioactive isotopes or even maybe rare chemicals, that she was unknowingly used as a test subject in a Department of Energy program, that government quickly suppressed and sanitized evidence after the incident to avoid liability. Possible. These are all possibilities. There's no formal proof of this, but the strange secrecy around the hazmat procedures, yes, the sealed casket, yes, and the initial delays in autopsy results, they all added fuel to the conspiracy fire. And while we're on the subject, why was Gloria's body stored in aluminum-lined containment for so long? Why were air samples inconclusive despite obvious symptoms in staffers? Questions I'd like to know the answers to. The most controversial theory, and one that offended the hospital staff the most, I might add. It was all in their heads. A psychogenic illness, mass hysteria. Got that? Proponents argue that Gloria's smell triggered an emotional panic response in the ER. Staff saw others faint and subconsciously mirrored the symptoms. All the tests were clean, so it must have been a collective psychological event. Simple as that. But let's be clear. 5 people were hospitalized. 1 required surgery for necrosis. Another developed chronic respiratory issues. So, this wasn't a panic attack. This was something chemical, something tangible. Even today, doctors and nurses who were in the room vehemently deny the hysteria theory. In the years after Gloria's death, her family demanded answers and received very few. The hospital quietly closed ranks. The medical community moved on, sort of. Gloria's body was finally buried in an unassuming cemetery in Riverside. No official resolution, just questions. So, what happened that night inside the ER at Riverside General? Was it an accidental chemical conversion inside a dying woman's body? Or was it something stranger and darker than anyone's willing to admit? When we talk about Gloria Ramirez, we often forget the person and just remember the event. She's known only as the toxic woman. It's a phrase that became both legend and label. But Gloria was more than just a medical mystery. She was a mother, a sister, a woman battling a painful late-stage cancer diagnosis who likely tried anything she could to survive just a little longer. Her death didn't just leave a family grieving, it triggered a chain reaction that turned a small ER into a chemical crime scene. It sent a shockwave through the medical community and raised questions that still have no clear answers. To this day, the true cause of what happened in Room 3 remains disputed. No toxic compound was ever confirmed by lab tests. The DMSO hypothesis, while tantalizing, remains theoretical, and the mass hysteria claim feels dismissive to those professionals whose lives were forever changed by this inexplicable event. Yet somehow, none of that matters to the public memory, because in the end, this story becomes something larger. It became folklore, a modern urban legend, part medical case file, part ghost story. You can find her name referenced in science books, college lectures, Reddit rabbit holes, and even conspiracy documentaries. She's the unsolvable riddle, the terrifying reminder that even in the age of science and logic, sometimes bodies can become battlegrounds and hospitals become haunted. Justice was never the point of the story. Resolution maybe. Understanding certainly. But even that seems to have slipped through our fingers. All we have left is a strange case and the ghost of a woman who, for one night, became impossibly dangerous. This is America's Strangest History. I'm John Genoa, and sometimes history doesn't give us closure, just more questions. Until next time, stay curious.